Welcome, everybody. My name's Catherine Thorndike. I'll be facilitating today. This is the Energy Working Group, and we currently have 19 participants. So we are going to start by first just starting to get to know each other, because we do plan on meeting together quite often, and folks would like to know a little bit about each of us. So I think since we have 19 participants and 20 minutes to do this, this gives us about a minute each to do a quick intro. So what I'll be doing is I'll be calling on the participants in the order that I have it. At the end, if I miss anybody, raise your hand, or I will also ask that at the end. And I'll start with just sort of an example for myself, and then I'll be going to Gabrielle next. So my name's Kathy Thorndike. I'm from North Sandwich, and I am the chair of the Sandwich Energy Committee and also a member of the Sandwich Climate Action Coalition. The projects that we are working on this year are presenting a 120 kilowatt municipal solar array to our town, and we plan to get it approved at town meeting. We also are very involved in the energy efficiency of all town purchases, such as vehicles, heating systems, new construction or building upgrades. And we even include working to stay involved on the smaller items like tools, chainsaws, office equipment. Okay, I will go to Gabrielle.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Watson. I am the chair of the Tamworth Energy Committee, and we just formed this last year. And so far we have focused on hosting a button-up workshop, and we are in the process of joining the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, bringing a warrant article to a town meeting in the spring. We've just hosted 2 public hearings on that. And we've also conducted 2 energy audits and are supporting also our town library to implement an energy audit they had previously done. So we're in the process of getting some energy efficiency and hopefully air source heat pumps and solar panels built.
Great. Bill Coder.
Hi, I'm Bill Coder from Bedford, New Hampshire. I did briefly serve on the Energy Commission for the town, but I'm no longer on that. Recently, I have helped to ramp up a group called Third Act New Hampshire. Third Act is a group of 60 plus seniors who are working in the area of climate change and democracy, protecting democracy. I'm not officially here representing that group, but I will mention that this Third Act National is working on trying to exert more influence on public utilities commissions, and I've opted to become a liaison for that activity, and I'm just getting grounded in how the PUC works a little bit, and I did get educated a little bit yesterday on the ISO New England. They had a consumer liaison group meeting. I heard Mary Beth on as a participant.
Thank you. Next would be Carol Sullivan.
Hi, I'm Carol Sullivan from Center Harbor, and I'm also on the plastics working group as well as this new energy working group. The main project that we're working on right now in Center Harbor is trying to get a solar array to power the municipal building approved by the residents of Center Harbor. And we had 1 public hearing, and we're going to have another public hearing on Saturday, I believe it's the 16th, at 9 in the morning. And then we will probably have one more. And then we will finally present it at the town meeting in March. Catherine was there at our first public hearing, and that was great because we want to try to exchange ideas on how to get this across to our constituencies and make sure that people are for this idea. But one thing that gave me a lot of pause from this meeting was that there are the NIMBYs, not in my backyard people at the meeting. And so it made me think about that and wonder what the future of solar is and whether scientists and researchers are looking at how to do solar in a way that is less costly and less kind of obtrusive, let's so to say, in fields. And I know, rooftops are one idea, and Paul suggested or shared an article in which a person in California was talking about that. And but we don't have any rooftops in our municipal buildings that are in good enough shape to do it. So we are doing a ground mount solar array. And so, I'm wondering how to, I'm interested in the future. And so
Carol, I'm going to move
Yeah.
this along a little bit, but we are going to talk a little later in the meeting about a specific group to work on items like that.
Okay,
Very-
good.
Very important. Thank you.
Mhm.
Dave Kuhnhart?
Thank you very much, Catherine. David Kuhnhart, I'm on the Tamworth Energy Committee helping Gabrielle. She expressed well most of the things we're doing. I bring to that 13 years in the solar industry, which has become greatly more effective and efficient in the last 2 decades. And also, I was a member of the board briefly in California of the first community choice aggregation entity like the one that we're attempting to set up for ourselves in Tamworth. We're also exploring potential for a community solar farm, as well as the small projects that were mentioned. Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chris Skoglund?
All right, thank you, Catherine. I'm Chris Skoglund. I am the Director of Energy Transition with Clean Energy New Hampshire. Prior to joining Clean Energy New Hampshire in 2022, I was with the state as the Climate and Energy Program Manager, working at all different levels on climate and energy issues, principally planning, and then later I spent a lot of time at the Public Utilities Commission and still do, but currently coordinate a solar group, our Drive Electric New Hampshire initiative, and a emerging building energy working group, and then participate in a lot of different investigations that are hosted by the Department of Energy. More recently, we were just finishing up our testimony on the net energy metering docket, which I know some of you had heard about and even wrote in letters of support, but mostly just listening and happy to kind of help support this effort.
Thank you. We'll hear from Chris a little bit later. Emily Friedrichs?
Hi, so I'm Emily Friedrichs. I live in Durham, where I am a town council member and representative to the Energy Committee. I also work for 350 NH, and I'm doing some work now with the Union of Concerned Scientists to make sure that climate is an issue for the Republican primary in New Hampshire this year. And in Durham, what we're focused on, we're lucky that we have a number of municipal projects that have been completed, and we're kind of solidly on our way in terms of the municipality looking at energy efficiency in vehicles and in buildings. We're trying to get them to look at smaller tools like leaf blowers, which someone else mentioned. And we're kind of looking now at how do we make this more of a mainstream every project utility conversation. So we're looking at looking to Lebanon and to Dover, who have passed EV ordinances that require all new construction to include future space to add an EV charger. And looking at some of our energy codes, we tend to be very progressive in that for multi-use buildings, but we're looking at are there ways that we can help even homeowners to think about energy as they're doing renovations in a way that's not overwhelming to their budget at all. So one such project is going to look at focusing on helping residents connect with the IRA rebates, which should be available to New Hampshire residents in fall of next year. So looking ahead to September and making sure that folks know that there are, $14,000 up to that amount for help with heat pumps and other things like that. So how we can really connect it to not just town buildings, but help all of our residents and property owners as well.
Thank you, Emily. John Gage.
Hi, thanks. So I had a career in computer science at Sun Microsystems and Oracle, and I started reading about climate science and what was going on, and stopped sleeping at night. Googled solutions and found carbon fee and dividend, which turns out a group, Citizens Climate Lobby, was advocating for. So thank you, John Condos. I see you here. He was one of the earlier CCLers in New Hampshire. Since then, I left work because all I could think about was this problem that we have with climate, and climate policy is energy policy. So that's why I'm interested in the energy group. I'm a volunteer of my local energy committee in Windham. I'm the state coordinator in New Hampshire with Citizens Climate Lobby. We have 1,800 members. We are active at the state and federal policy level. Let's see, I put some things into chat. I'll just paste that in. So some projects that we're working on is carbon cashback. That's a town citizens petition warrant article asking our state and federal legislators to pass carbon fee and dividend legislation. There's a new student movement that can be dropped into high schools and colleges, basically just putting up signs. Most effective climate policy, carbon fee and dividend, write Congress here. And it's something that a couple students can get together and teach their whole school a little climate economics and social activism. Citizens Climate Lobby is looking for more volunteers, so I'm always recruiting. And I think my wish as a volunteer is to just kind of support all of you and all of the things that you're doing. And add one more thing that you can do is help Congress pass carbon fee and dividend legislation, because it will accelerate doing all of the things that all of you are trying to do. Thank you.
Yeah. We have quite a few more people to go through. So in order to keep with our agenda, because we have some other interesting things we want to discuss, I'll ask that the next speakers just say briefly, name where you're from and what committees or organizations you might be with, and then just one short few words on one of your projects. So that would start with John Condos.
Okay, John Condos. I live in Chesterfield. I am the Monadnock Energy Circuit Rider for Clean Energy New Hampshire. So I'm working with all the towns in the region. I can't give you one because there are dozens of different kinds of projects, many of the kinds of things people have been mentioning. I'll just add that I'm a retired solar contractor, energy auditor, and spent many, many years in the solar industry.
Great, thanks. John Stevens.
There we go. Now you can probably hear me. Yeah.
Yes.
Dunbarton and Energy Committee. We have been active since 2008, and we have done a whole lot of projects on town buildings, heating, lighting, and that kind of thing. We also started a neighbors neighbors warming neighbors thing. So since about 2014, we have audited about 35 or 40 homes in town, and we have installed a town solar system, which is about 62 or 63 meg, and I wanted to add that I was contacted by a guy on the Marlborough Energy Committee. It's a newly informed, and he was asking questions about our neighbors warming neighbors thing, and that was added to it. So if you wanted to include him in this somehow, tell me, and I'll check with him and get you his email.
Thank you, John. Laura Ryder.
Yes, that's me. So I am a member of the Bradford Energy Committee, and I currently work for the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department. It's currently working in on the development of their new wildlife action plan, which looks very closely at species in greatest need of conservation. And it's a 10-year plan, and there's a lot going on there in terms of climate change. In town, we've worked a lot of energy efficiency that's coming to an end. We're currently really focused on joining community power. We have 2 upcoming public workshops, as well as warrant article coming up. And one final thing, we've been told that it is possible the towns can put like a $5 fee onto the registration fees for vehicles that can go towards purchasing electric vehicles charging stations. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're focused on right now.
Thank you. Patsy Beffa-Negrini.
Hi, thank you. I'm from Nelson. I was the town champion for the carbon cashback. We passed that warrant article in Nelson quite a while back. I was also the chair of our community power committee. We ended up going with Cheshire Community Power. So we're one of a handful of towns that are doing the county version of community power. Our energy committee has done weatherization and municipal solar and heat pumps for the town buildings. So we are now trying to focus on town residents. So our next project will probably be doing weatherization. So that's Nelson.
Great, thank you. Paul Bemis.
So Paul Bemis, I'm the chair of the Bristol Energy Committee. I'm also the president of Granite State ASHRAE. Background in electrical and mechanical engineering. I worked for Hewlett Packard for a lot of years. So involved with energy. We've done a large solar array for municipal wastewater treatment, a 350 kilowatt array. And right now trying to implement community power in our town.
Thank you. Paul Panish.
Hi, I'm Paul Panish, chair of the Barrington Energy Committee, also a commissioner on the Barrington Conservation Commission. This is the first year of our committee. Our primary activity this year is putting together a community power aggregation. We're at the stage where we've had 2 public meetings on that. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Representative Parsha.
Sorry, couldn't get my mouse to unmute. Yeah, I can be quick. I'm here to listen and learn, and I do serve on the Science and Tech Committee in Concord. And so anything I'm learning here, I might try to come back and influence other people with some of the I'm sure very wise ideas that come out of this group. And that's the long and short of it.
Thank you for being here. Sherry Boschert.
Hi, everybody. I'm on the Lebanon Energy Advisory Committee, which has done a lot of things around installing solar and energy efficiency. And hopefully in the next 6 months or so, we'll be connecting our landfill gas to energy project. But my expertise is with electric vehicles. I'm a co-founder of the national nonprofit Plug in America. I've been driving EVs since 2002. And so I chair the EV subcommittee for LEAC, the Energy Advisory Committee. We did pass zoning amendments last January that requires EV charging at new developments and for major changes at existing developments. We're waiting to hear this month, we hope, about whether we got a $5.2 million federal grant that we applied for to put in EV charging all over Lebanon, or even a portion of that. We'll see. We did just get a grant from the state to get 2 electric street sweepers and install the EV charging infrastructure for those. That's just as of 2 days ago, we found out. We just held the Upper Valley EV Expo. And I could go on, but that's mostly what I get involved in here. I'm a climate migrant, moved from California to here. And I started a listserv that I'll put a link to in the chat for anyone. It's called NHEV, for anyone who has an EV or is thinking about getting an EV. It's just a way for us to communicate, kind of like this group for energy committees.
Thank you, and good luck with that grant. Susan Richmond.
Yeah, hi, I'm Susan Richmond. I live in Durham, and Emily's got the energy committee taken care of, so I'm on the waste committee, and we need new garbage trucks, and we talk them into getting EV trucks instead of LNG trucks, so yay for that. And otherwise, I am kind of a liaison person with the what is more or less our parent organization, New Hampshire Network, Climate, Environment, Energy, because we sort of have the facility with emails, and it just seems to make things smoother. So my role is largely communication. I am not an engineer. I was a first grade teacher, but I really care about all of this and will do my best. Thanks. Next.
And last is Tad Montgomery.
Hey, everybody. I am the Energy and Facilities Manager for the City of Lebanon.
Thank you. So next I'm going to have Gabrielle show us the results of the survey that we recently posted.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to put into the chat the link to the slides that I'm about to share for those of you who like to look along or jump ahead, because I know some of us like to do that. But I'm going to share my screen, if I can get that working, and put in slideshow view. So we had 24 people, actually 23, because one person responded twice, respond to the survey. We've got 78 folks on our email list, so that's a pretty good response rate. We asked what kind of organization people represent or are members of, and people could click as many as applied, so this adds up to more than 100%, you'll notice. But the vast majority, over almost 60%, are members of energy committees. Next, after that, are nonprofit organizations, and then a number of public officials. Interestingly, we did not have any people identify as energy service providers, even though there were some of those on the very first call that we had. Some of the other categories that people mentioned were representing community power organizations, Citizens Climate Lobby, Third Act, other local climate coalitions. We have our one energy and facilities manager, hello Tad, and an academic. So that's who in the room, at least in terms of responding to the survey. We also, and then we wanted to know, what would people find useful for us to focus our meetings on. And the highest rated thing was basically information on energy innovations, closely followed by exchanges on the nuts and bolts topics that, you know, energy committees tend to try to focus on: solar, EVs, et cetera, community power. And a number of people equally found networking important. And then still 62%, so the majority of people wanting to coordinate action around climate and energy policy, or I should say energy legislation and policy, not necessarily climate policy, because that's a separate topic, arguably. So other things that people are coming to the meetings and wanting to get moral support, which I thought was great. Activities and methods of other energy committees. So it's really just wanting to learn from each other. You can see there's a theme starting to emerge here. And then a number of people wanting to input into the climate action plan. We asked what topics, in-depth topics, would people be interested in us organizing presentations and discussions around at our meetings. The highest one was on energy committees sharing innovations and experiences that they have done, followed by funding for energy initiatives, and love hearing the stories about successful grant applications, and I'm hoping to learn more about that. And then after those two top ones, tracking New Hampshire legislation and energy policy and solar projects were pretty top rated. And then beyond that, you'll see specific topics like battery, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, community power, other topics that energy committees frequently work on. So in large part, we can group most of the responses as being connected in one way or another about exchanging and learning about what local energy committees can do. There's also over half of the people said that they'd be interested in creating some sort of joint statements around energy policy so that we could use our collective voice with the PUC and the legislature and other entities. Other things that people would like to see topics on included energy efficient resources, heat pumps, microgrids, community solar, how to educate people on energy tax credits and other incentives, e-waste, energy justice, and grid planning, interestingly. So lots of wide interest in topics. So we will not be getting bored on our meetings. We also asked whether there was interest among people in joining a subgroup to work on particular issues. And we specifically asked about two topics that had arisen in the earlier meetings that we had. And interestingly, there wasn't a lot of interest in having a subgroup on community power, even though there are a lot of people with current involvement in forming community power programs in their communities. So the big takeaway from that I intuit from this anyway, is that this is something that those who are engaged in it feel like their needs are being pretty well met by the entities that they're engaging with, like the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire and the private brokers. The 77% of the respondents did say that they wanted, they would be interested in an energy legislation and policy working group. And then other subgroups that people mentioned had to do with current town actions like municipal solar or energy efficiency or photovoltaics, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging. So again, that theme about focusing on the nuts and bolts of what energy committees do is prominent. Other subgroup ideas is around climate action planning and building decarbonization. And, you know, I don't know if there'll be other energy and facility managers who might be attracted to the network. It would be fabulous if that were to happen. And this would be a great platform for those people to connect and learn from each other. So there may be some outreach that we might want to do going forward. And we also asked a question about, for those members who are a member of a municipal energy committee or commission, what projects have they already undertaken that they might be able to share some experience about? So you see there's quite a wide range of topics. Here you see 63% of respondents are already involved with community power. Just over half have or are currently involved with solar projects, municipal energy efficiency, home energy efficiency, and helping residents and businesses tap into rebates and other incentives. And then, you know, a smattering of other initiatives, as we've just heard people mentioning. And then very few people who've done work on building codes or job fairs or heat pumps or battery storage. So those are some of the sort of more innovative emerging areas that we might also want to focus on, just because there's less experience to be shared amongst the members of the working group. So other projects that people have also undertaken: energy expos, doing research on energy justice, and community power, home battery projects, landfill gas to energy. There are 2 people who had that experience. One person has experience fighting and defeating the Granite Bridge pipeline, and one person had experience with a town pledge towards 100% renewable. So quite a rich array of resources and experience in the group. And again, this is just about a third of the folks on our mailing list who responded to this. Just over almost 60% of the people who responded said that they would be willing to share their email with others. So if we created a directory of resources, linking people with the experiences that they had, and, you know, say I was really interested in talking to other communities that had experience putting in solar arrays, I could go to the directory and say, okay, who has that experience, and then find their email and reach out to them. So not everybody was willing to do that. That made us curious that if we asked a bit more directly, if others might step forward and do that. And I think that's something we'll continue talking about going forward, because we think that a member resource directory would be a useful resource for members of the energy working group. And I believe that was my last slide. Yes, looks like the last slide. And I'll just keep this open for a second in case anybody has any questions, and I can go back. And just unmute yourself and jump in with a question if you have it. Hearing none.
Okay.
We'll move on to the next thing that we were going to talk about. Let's see if I can get myself out of where I was. Hold on.
What we're going to talk about next is going to be possibly our first subgroup, and Paul Bemis is going to introduce that.
Yeah, actually, I was going to introduce it, and then Paul was going to talk specifically about the energy working group subgroup focused on energy committee. So we talked about whether there's interest in creating subgroups that would meet separately from the large group to focus on particular issues. As we saw in the survey, there's a fair, good degree of interest in having one focusing on energy policy. So engagement with the legislature, the PUC, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, and other entities. So there's interest in that was expressed by the respondents to the survey. And so the question right now would be, if there's interest in that, would people like to step up and self-organize that? And then Paul also has a specific proposal for a subgroup just focused on energy committees, because we saw that not everybody is a member of energy committees, and energy committee members really want to talk to each other. So can I just see a set of hands? And I know we don't have everybody on this call, but are there people right now who would be interested in a energy policy subgroup? Let's see. And I just froze my screen. So I'm seeing at least a half a dozen, probably more, almost 10. And Chris, thank you for raising your hand because that's great to have you on that. Why don't you put your name in the chat if you are interested in the energy policy subgroup so that I can capture that because I can't write fast enough to get everybody down. And we'll probably put out a general note to the list and invite people to join that. But maybe as a process suggestion, Chris, could you and I maybe have a huddle offline and sort of think about that? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So Paul, over to you to talk about Energy Committee subgroup.
There we go. All right. So I have been working in Bristol for a couple of years on our energy committee, trying to move the ball forward. And I realized there's an awful lot of other people doing the same thing in little towns and big towns around New Hampshire. And it just seems logical to me that we know each other and can share each other's best practices or techniques or methods or information. I don't like reinventing the wheel. So the idea here is that we exchange information on topics of common interest. We are all, I think, interested in municipal solar. Things are changing there, the rules are changing, there's money changing in terms of reimbursement for that and grants for that. Community solar, same thing. I don't know if you're all aware of what's going on in the state of New York, but community solar has become a big opportunity and growing very rapidly in the state of New York. And community solar solves that problem of, I can't put them on my roof because I'm near trees. Community solar solves that by putting them in a place that's common and everybody shares from it. Community Power Coalition, very interested in that as it relates to each energy group, because I think that is the way that we get at specifically data about consumption. So how do we know how much our town is using until we can get our hands around some data? Get to know one another so we can reach out directly. Hey, what is going on? I'm having regular conversations now, I think, with Carol Sullivan and Catherine. And so I'm beginning to get to know people, but I've been doing this a couple of years. I still don't know people, and it's just crazy. We're not that big a state. So get to know each other. What can we learn from each other? What obstacles do we face? How do we overcome them? Sometimes this comes down to language, how we present it, how we nuance it, how we overcome the NIMBYism or the arguments that are often propagated by special interests or what have you. I'd like to begin to drive a common set of goals and objectives. I mean, we have people like Chris. I think Chris is going to represent us, I hope. Don't want to put words in his mouth, but representative. His job, however, is to aggregate our needs. In other words, if we can come together with a common set of objectives, a common set of goals, a common set of mission statement, that kind of thing, it's representative, therefore, of a fairly large constituency in the state and therefore tangible. It's much better. But conversely, I don't have the time necessarily to go to Concord and sit in these meetings. So helping establish a common set of goals and objectives, I think would be something that could be used for legislative purposes or even influencing our own town leaders. There are very red towns, there are blue towns, we have to deal with opposition. Logistically, I think it makes sense to meet periodically. I'm thinking every other month. Each month is a lot. And we had talked about this group meeting every other month. So maybe we could do it on the alternate month where we get together and just compare notes. It doesn't have to be heavy, just what's going on, what are you doing? There would be a common host. So I would host the first one and try to set up and provide an agenda and some meeting reminders, but it should rotate. It shouldn't be one person. It should rotate and just share the load. Initial meetings, information exchange. Who's doing what in what towns? It would likely lead to directory. I'm already making one here on paper. As everybody introduced themselves, I'm making notes. So just getting to know one another and finding out where you are and how to reach out to you is important from my point of view. Longer term, I think that the energy person for the town is going to become a more significant issue in the town. It's going to become a higher level of position in the town, a more important one. It affects every single user, every single person. There's also energy justice. This is a big deal for the Department of Energy right now, is the issue of energy justice, or in some cases injustice. There's energy poverty that a lot of people are facing, where the cost of their energy is a very high percentage of their income. How can we affect that? I am an advocate of distributed energy, so I personally think distributed energy is a way to address energy justice, and I've been doing some writing about that some of you may have seen that I think is pertinent. And how do we make each town as energy independent as possible? For example, what's the load? I still don't know the load of my own town. How many kilowatt hours are we consuming here in my town of Bristol? I think the Community Power Coalition is a vehicle to get there, but at the moment, I don't know how many. And then what can be done to offset it? The local resources. We have hydro in this town, and solar, and we have some wind, and we have some biomass. How can we aggregate this in a way to offset our consumption? And then, of course, how do we reduce our load? There are some interesting examples right now out there of towns and locations that have done some really interesting work to try to reduce load. Most importantly, knowing how much load you're consuming makes a big difference. So that's part of it. And then dependency on the grid. This has to do with resiliency as well. Dependency on the grid, of course, the grid is becoming less reliable with respect to issues we're facing like climate change. So how do we implement microgrids to the point where we could disconnect and still be able to run for a period of time without any grid? And then, of course, the issue of cost. The cost is high for energy. I'm tired of being told that because we live in the Northeast, we are inevitably going to have high energy costs. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me, and I'd like to work on lowering overall cost. And then, of course, resiliency. Every town should have a resiliency plan, as we have seen with hurricanes hitting places in the United States, most notably in the New York area a few years ago when Sandy hit. Those towns were without power for a long period of time, and they have since begun to implement microgrids in a big way to help handle that situation. We don't necessarily face a lot of that here, but we need to be prepared for it, and I don't think we have a plan in general. Things like charging cell phones, for example, becomes almost impossible. So that's it. I didn't want to spend a tremendous amount of time here, but wanted to recommend an energy working group where we could get together and begin to look at some of these issues and get to know one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you'll be setting up meeting times, correct, Paul?
If people are interested, I definitely will set up a meeting time and begin to do this for sure. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we have Chris Skoglund, whom you've met from Clean Energy New Hampshire, the Director of Energy Transition.
All right, thank you very much. So I guess my interest was just in sharing a few things that have been happening, and just being in like making myself available as a participant in this group, to be a conduit with what is happening in Concord on a day-to-day basis, moment to moment. As someone just mentioned, that you can't necessarily afford to be in Concord, and that's what we're paid to do. So I'm part of our Clean Energy Use Policy team. There's Sam Evans-Brown, who many of you may know from his days with NHPR. He's our executive director. We also have a director of legislative affairs, Nick Paul, who has historically worked in campaigns, but we are a significant beneficiary of his experience and expertise, with him being at the State House. We've all been now working together for a year. I'm working principally at the Public Utilities Commission across almost every docket that touches on energy. We don't necessarily engage heavily in every docket equally, but we are keeping an eye on them because no part of the energy system is independent. So recent updates that I know you all were tracking is that the New Hampshire Public Utilities Commission approved, sort of, the New Hampshire Saves Energy Efficiency Plan, which was submitted by the public utilities, not the public utilities, by the state's electric distribution companies as well as the gas distribution companies. Now, these are programs that they are required to administer using fees that are assessed on every unit of electricity and gas sales in the state. But it's up to the PUC to approve their programs with the idea that they should be getting the most bang for every dollar invested. And the utilities submitted a program, and it had the full support of every single party to the docket: Department of Energy, Office of Consumer Advocate, Clean Energy New Hampshire, CLF, and the Nature Conservancy, the Acadia Center. But still, there was a question of whether our PUC would approve it. The current commission have all been appointed pretty much within the past 18 months. That's a little rare because it's supposed to be like the Senate. There are 6-year terms for the commissioners, and they're supposed to kind of not overlap, but run so that every 2 years there's a new commissioner being approved. And so we are in a unique situation where the governor has not only appointed all of these commissioners, but appointed them in a very short amount of time because of the end of one term and then 2 other commissioners quitting and leaving their posts early. The commission has, at least 2 of the members have shown some deep suspicion of programs that are government required and that are being administered using the public dollars. And as you may remember, 2 years ago, they in fact rejected an entire plan and upended the entire energy efficiency market. So there was a lot of concern about what the PUC was going to do. I understand that you received inquiries from Susan and asking you to write in letters to the PUC. So this ends up being an opportunity for an example of an opportunity for the New Hampshire network to weigh in on things and actually have a positive policy benefit. Because I think while the New Hampshire network is growing in its people's awareness and understanding of it, each of you represent towns, energy committees, or other organizations, so that if you're writing under your own letterhead rather than 50 people signing onto a letter from the New Hampshire network, the PUC commissioners are like, oh, okay, the town of Tamworth signing in from the energy committee, the town of Lebanon signing in. Like, that has more weight, because if they're concerned about fighting for the best interests of the state, you really represent a huge chunk of the state. And they look at that rather than the New Hampshire network as being one entity. So one way to possibly conceive of your work engaging at the PUC and the legislature is the New Hampshire network is a convener or cauldron for discussion, but then you can leverage the power of your individual organizations and titles to weigh in. And that can also be something that we saw for Senate Bill 68, which expanded last session, the net metering program to allow solar to be sited for a municipality, whether it's a school system or a town, for it to be sited outside of the geographic boundaries of the town. Previously, if like Durham wanted to have it, and Susan and Em and I were like super excited and advocating for that, well, if we're out of land, we can't site a new solar facility that would be beneficial to either, the new middle school or to the town. But with the new legislation, if there's open space that we are able to make use of in adjoining municipality, we can set up a project there and be the off-taker of the energy credit that is generated. A lot of the reason why that came about is because on the day that the testimony was there, and Representative Partial may remember this, is we had letters that we submitted on behalf of individual towns. We had a group letter that many of the New Hampshire networks also signed on to. I think we had 300 signatories on one letter, many people identifying as the New Hampshire network, but then people identifying from their town and the New Hampshire network. But then we also had individuals from the New Hampshire network and other towns that showed up to testify. And they talked to the ST&E committee, the Science, Technology, Environment Committee, to say, here's why this matters to us. And we want solar. We want to reduce our tax burden for our town by reducing our energy. But part of that came about because you had created this space for us to reach out to and say, hey, would you be interested in this issue? Similarly, yesterday, you all may have had a beneficial impact on the net energy metering discourse that's happening at the Public Utilities Commission. There's another docket, 22-060. If these names and numbers don't mean anything to you, I will make sure you have my contact information and please reach out. I talk about this stuff as if it's a second language, or actually it's my first. But they're looking into, the PUC is looking into what credit they should be offering to all energy systems that are solar or hydro, whether they've been in service for 5 years or they're coming into service next year. And Clean Energy New Hampshire submitted its testimony. The biggest concern, though, was what would the Department of Energy be submitting? And so there was, from my understanding from staff at DOE, they were swamped with letters from people from all around the state. And some of that came from Susan and I having a conversation at the local energy solutions conference. She's like, how can we help? And then there was an appeal from Susan to you all. And my understanding is a lot of letters were coming from this group, again, under your own individual names, your own individual organizations. And it made it look really organic and not like it was just this kind of new group that was up to no good, the New Hampshire Network. It actually looked like the whole state was doing it. Similarly, Hooray had asked us questions. That's the Hillsborough Area Renewable Energy Initiative. They also did something similar. And then other municipalities that, so John Condos, who's on this call, is one of our energy circuit riders. Our circuit riders work with municipalities to help them do some of the things that you're interested in. And if you're not familiar with our circuit riders, that might be a presentation for another day. But they reached out to municipalities. So working through these individual organizations, each individual organization decided that, Clean Energy New Hampshire had an idea, but it was important to that individual organization, which then they used, it became kind of like the old phone tree that you might have had back in the day before, like one person calls one person, that person calls two people, and that's how you tell everyone school's canceled. And, the way they did things back in the 70s when I was born. But that's how it worked. The Department of Energy submitted their testimony, and it reads very similar to New Hampshire or Clean Energy New Hampshire. They actually came out with a letter to the PUC saying, we support net metering. And that is a really good positive outcome. It increases the chance that we'll be able to preserve net metering and maybe even strengthen it. But now we can all turn our attention to sending waves of letters to the Public Utilities Commission, because we understand that, they need to hear, again, from the public, but also from towns and businesses, that this matters. This is beneficial to everybody, and this is a program they want to be supported. The final thing is, not everyone can come to Concord, but even if 4 or 5 people show up for the hearings, no one ever comes to the PUC hearings. So if there's people in the audience, just physically sitting there, that can change the entire tone of a hearing. So my main pitch was like, there are positive things that are happening, but I think a lot of it is kind of this growing engagement from the grassroots. In fact, my final note is 2 representatives from the ST&E committee noted that change happens from the grassroots. However, they were complaining that 6 to 10 out of every single okay, I'm sorry, I'll state it another way. 95% of the comments that they get are coming from people that are advocating for energy efficiency, clean energy. They were concerned that they weren't hearing from more conservative voices. To me, that means we just need to make sure that more people keep showing up so they can't disregard this message, but that it's also coming from municipalities, and it's coming from town energy committees, and it's coming from businesses, so that they're not just trying to say, oh, those are just environmental activists. Which is what they have tried to do with so many of us in the past. But really, as someone said, we're not arguing just about climate. We're arguing about energy. We're arguing about economics. It's all one big picture. I am a classroom teacher and I can talk forever, so I'm going to stop.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask for questions before Susan talks about what our agendas for our next upcoming meetings, but looks like Susan might have a question.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much. 2 questions. So when and what do we write to the PUC now? And what about the climate action plan? I participated November 30th. It was really interesting. Are we supposed to come to every last meeting because they're not redundant? What should we do?
So I think that's an excellent question, and I'm sorry I forgot to mention it. So I coordinated the development of the 2009 plan and did not write it, as some people try to attribute it. I just managed every single work. For those of you that remember the show MASH, I was Radar O'Reilly. I was not Hawkeye, BJ, or Colonel Potter. I was just, I had a role to play. But I have been talking to the staff that are at DES that we worked on that together, and they are trying to figure that out. They got a lot of great feedback, but a lot of it was goals. What they might be now looking for is how do they package those into programs and projects? Because what ultimately has to happen, and this is somewhat insane, having worked in government, having written plans for town level, state level, and even New England and Eastern Canada, they're expected to come up with a plan by March and then submit applications for funding competitive at the national level in early April. And so while we largely threw out ideas, and I was there too, saying, here's what we want to happen, we may not have focused enough yet on how we want it to happen, who should implement, what programs we should be doing, and what order we should be doing. One thing I had offered to Susan is to give a presentation that I gave a couple years ago about, like, what is New Hampshire's energy actually like? What are our emissions actually like? Because that might help identify for you all, because I have my own interpretation, where do you think there might be priorities for targets? But then with your collective experience, expertise, and wisdom, you might say, oh, there's one program that we should absolutely do. And then that becomes your recommendation. So I think right now, New Hampshire Listens, which is based at the Carsey Institute for UNH, is kind of scratching their heads because they got a lot of good feedback. But how do they make that into the climate plan that is submitted to the EPA that then someone can apply for a lot of money, like $30 million to do projects? And it may come down to us getting a little bit more precise about saying, here's the program to implement. And I appreciate John's point about like the carbon fee and dividend. That's something that we need to do, but that's something that would be done at the federal level or to some degree at the state level. That's a policy, not a program or a project. Like a weatherization program, like something like Mo mentioned, that he's interested in, like weatherize like all what's the word? Manufactured houses in the state. That's a little bit more of a targeted program because now we're dealing with energy equity. We're getting rid of like fossil fuels. And so this is just kind of one example. And then identifying also who does it. Is it like the community action agencies? Is it regional planning commissions might do something else to help with EV planning? Or someone mentioned that there's an energy person for every town and they're going to become more important. I'm sorry that I keep taking that one person who spoke and just keep calling on them some person. You have a name. Maybe there is something that the state needs. I know Clean Energy New Hampshire is possibly interested in taking John Condos and cloning him and having more so that we can be helping the energy committees that you stand up, because not every town has staff, but if we can drop one person in once a week, that's great. So it can be like swing away with being innovative and creative. But what I think I'm hearing is we need to like, what are fundable projects that someone can just take and apply for funding, even if the state doesn't, because that's always a issue.
Thank you. That answer your question, Susan?
Well, I'll make sure that Chris gives me an ABC and, January 1st and January 20th and I'll
okay,
mail
so
it out.
the short answer is there will be more listening sessions. New Hampshire Listens is going to pivot. And I think if you pivot too, so that when you do show up to one or both, we're a little bit more ready. Like we all said, what was the most important thing to us? Because that's how humans work. We've got our passion. But I think we may all need to figure out what are the things that like, how do we reduce it down to one or two programs, recognizing it's not going to be perfect. The New Hampshire Listens folks and the DES folks will try to package it all together into something that's a little bit more possible, but also there is a more comprehensive plan that they're going to undertake that will follow over the course of the next year. I think the Biden administration and the EPA are like, let's just get as much money out the door before the 2024 election, because we don't know what's going to happen in the 2024 election. So let's just throw millions at this because we might lose. And so it's a Band-Aid.
Thank you, Chris. So Susan, do you want to close out the meeting with talking about the upcoming meetings?
So just a quickie. And Catherine, boy, you kept us on time. Thank you. So does everyone see my little screen here? I hope.
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, we can see
So the things we want to leave you with that we're going to start subgroups. We have Paul, Energy Committee. Many of you put your name in chat, but all he has to do is blast it on our Google groups because you signed up, and you'll know when he's having his first meeting, and it sounds wonderful. He'll kick you that group off. Legislation policy, it sounds like Gabrielle's already scheming on how to get that started, but consider whether you might like to be that initial facilitator. And the job would be to set the initial meeting date, the agenda, provide Zoom link, and facilitate the initial meetings and guidance towards a roadmap of where to go on that. As far as actual meetings that we have planned, using the survey that you guys filled out, Chris is coming back in January. He's going to give us an overview of the legislative and policy landscape going into 2024. And February, we're going to try and put together a program on funding opportunities. And we have a number of people that we're going to contact that we're thinking would be good speakers, but please let us know if you would like to facilitate, or if you have suggestions of who would be good speakers for a program like that. And then finally, resources. We'll mail out to you the link to the spreadsheet of people who volunteered their expertise. And this is just a little thumbnail of how that looks. But we don't have a lot of names. So if your name, when I mail it out, if you see your name's not on it and you'd like to be, look at this email address at the bottom, newhampshirenetwork@gmail.com. That is so easy to remember. I won't give you any other emails. That's the email that you can send us saying, gee, I'm not on the Google group to get all the emails for the energy working group, or, please include me on the list of individuals who can be resources, because I really do know about this or that, and you can see how we organize it. Just name, email address, and what you know about. And that's what I have to say. So back to you, Catherine. Chris, did you have a question? Your hand's up.
Yeah, just real quick. I will follow up on the presentation for January. I had one other topic that I was wanted to check in with you, but if anyone wants to poke, prod, or connect with me before that presentation, it does not need to be a one-man show. I do not need to be Dick Van Dyke in when he was wearing all that stuff in Mary Poppins. But
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So just to quick encapsulate, this is it for a sort of potpourri meeting, and there'll be the specific subgroup meetings, and then monthly topical meetings. And this meeting today was planned by Catherine, Gabrielle, Paul, and myself, but that also can switch. So again, if you are willing to do any more planning or facilitating, please email us. And it's really easy to do it through Google Groups or newhampshirenetwork@gmail.com. Okay, anything else? Catherine, you ready to sign us out? You're muted. Catherine, you're muted.
Thanks.
Catherine. There.
Got it. So much exciting going on. I think we all wished we could be cloned so that we could do it all. But very nice to meet everybody, and thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month. Bye. Looks like
Yay.
all left.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. And I was just trying to save the chat, but I think it'll save automatically for me. I'll stop recording.
Ah, good.